A single fall at a playground sets off a chain of events that will change the lives of a billionaire. His son, and the brave waitress who ran to help, but no one could predict how far it would go. The sun was shining bright over the city park that afternoon. Children's laughter filled the air as parents chatted on benches and watched from a distance. It was one of those peaceful days when everything felt light and normal. Among the children playing on the swings and slides was a little boy named Ethan. He was 6 years old, full of energy, and had a smile that could melt anyone's heart. No one at the park knew that Ethan was the son of one of the richest men in the city, billionaire Richard Hale. Ethan's father wasn't the type of man who showed up at parks or played catch with his son. His life was meetings, business deals, and private jets. But he did care deeply for Ethan, even if he didn't always show it. That's why on that sunny afternoon, 2 quiet men in black suits stood nearby as security guards. Their job was simple: watch Ethan, protect him, keep the family's name out of attention. Not far from the playground, sitting under a tree, was a young woman named Maya Torres. She was 28 and worked as a waitress at a small diner 3 blocks away. Her lunch break was short, and this little park was her favorite place to sit for a few minutes apiece. She had a simple sandwich wrapped in foil and an old phone that she used to scroll through pictures of her late mother whenever she missed her. Her life wasn't easy. She worked long hours and lived in a small apartment, but she had learned to find small moments of happiness in quiet places like this. Maya wasn't paying much attention to the kids at first, but something about Ethan caught her eye. He was climbing up the highest part of the play structure, a wooden tower that looked a little too big for him. His guards were talking to each other, one of them glancing at his phone. Maya frowned slightly, wondering if someone should be closer to him. Then, in a split second, everything changed. A sharp scream tore through the park. Parents gasped. A few kids stopped playing. Maya's eyes shot up just in time to see Ethan lose his balance, his small hands slipping from the railing. He fell hard onto the ground with a thud that made everyone freeze. For a second, there was silence, then chaos. Without thinking twice, Maya dropped her sandwich and ran. Her shoes hit the pavement as her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't care who the boy was. She just knew he needed help. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling but steady enough to check if he was breathing. His eyes were open, but he wasn't moving. There was a scrape on his forehead, and his little chest rose unevenly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Don't move," Maya said softly, her voice calm, even though fear was bubbling inside her. She turned to the crowd gathering around and shouted, "Call an ambulance!" The guards finally reached them, their faces pale. One of them tried to lift Ethan, but Maya stopped him. "Don't move him," she said firmly. "He might have hurt his back." The guard froze, surprised by her confidence. Maya gently took off her scarf and folded it under Ethan's head to keep it still. She kept talking to him in a soothing voice, telling him everything would be fine, that help was coming. She wiped the dust off his cheek and watched carefully for signs of pain. A few parents watched with worry, whispering that the woman seemed to know what she was doing. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air. Paramedics ran into the park with stretchers and equipment. Maya quickly explained what happened, how he fell, how long he'd been still, and what she'd noticed about his breathing. They nodded, impressed by how calm she was. As they lifted Ethan onto the stretcher, he finally whimpered and grabbed Maya's hand weakly. She squeezed it gently and smiled. "You're going to be okay, little one." When the ambulance doors closed, Maya stood back, suddenly realizing her knees were shaking. The crowd began to scatter. Parents hugged their kids a little tighter. The 2 guards were on their phones, clearly reporting the incident. Maya sighed and brushed the dirt from her jeans. She didn't think much about it. She had done what anyone should. She just hoped the boy would be fine. She turned to leave, ready to head back to work before her break ended, but one of the guards stopped her. His tone was polite, but firm. "Ma'am, please wait a moment." Maya frowned. "Is something wrong?" "The boy's father?" "Mr. Hale," he said carefully, as if the name should mean something to her, "wants to speak with you." She blinked, confused. "Mr. Hale." The guard nodded toward the sleek black SUV parked near the entrance of the park. The windows were tinted, and it looked completely out of place among the trees and playground equipment. Maya hesitated. She wasn't sure she wanted to meet whoever that was. But before she could refuse, the door opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark suit, though it was a warm day. His face was tense, and his eyes were sharp, the kind of eyes that had seen too much of the world. Richard Hale looked around briefly, then his gaze landed on Maya. He walked over, his movements quick and controlled. "You were the one who helped my son?" he asked in a low voice. Maya nodded, unsure what to say. "I just saw him fall. I helped until the ambulance came." Richard studied her for a long moment. He wasn't used to people who didn't talk much or ask for anything. Finally, he said, "Thank you. You might have saved his life." Maya gave a small smile. "I just did what anyone would do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Please, take this. It's a small thank you." Her eyes widened. Oh no. "I can't accept that. It's the least I can do," he insisted. But she shook her head. "I don't want money. I just hope your son's okay." Richard stared at her, completely thrown off. People didn't say no to him, ever. He didn't know how to respond. Finally, he gave a short nod, almost respectful. "You're different," he said quietly. Maya just smiled faintly. "Have a good day, sir." Then she turned and walked away, her heart still beating fast. As she disappeared down the park path, Richard watched her go. He didn't even know her name yet, but something about the way she'd handled everything, the calmness, the care, the refusal of money, stayed with him. When he got into his car, his driver asked softly, "Should we follow her, sir?" Richard shook his head. "No, not today." He looked out the window toward the playground where his son had fallen just minutes before. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Gratitude that had nothing to do with wealth. He didn't know it yet. But that small act of kindness from a stranger would soon change everything in his life. The next day felt like any other for Maya. She woke up early, tied her hair back, and walked the same cracked sidewalks to the small diner where she worked. The bell above the door jingled when she walked in, the smell of coffee and fried eggs already in the air. Her coworker Lena waved from behind the counter. "Hey, you look tired," Lena said as Maya put on her apron. "I didn't sleep much," Maya admitted with a soft smile. She kept thinking about the little boy from the park, Ethan. His frightened eyes, his tiny hand gripping hers, the ambulance speeding away. She wondered if he was okay. She didn't know where to find out, and it wasn't really her place to ask. She just hoped he was recovering. By noon, the diner was buzzing with its usual lunch crowd. Truck drivers, office workers, and tired moms came in and out. Maya moved from table to table, refilling coffee cups and taking orders. Everything seemed normal until the door opened and a sudden hush fell over the place. Two men in dark suits walked in. Their clothes were too perfect for this kind of diner. One of them scanned the room before whispering something into his earpiece. Then, a tall man followed behind them, the same man from the park. Richard Hale. Maya froze, holding a coffee pot midair. She couldn't believe he was here. What was a billionaire doing in her little diner? Everyone was staring. Even her boss peeked out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Richard walked up to her booth quietly and gave her a small nod. "Miss Torres." She blinked. "How do you know my name?" He gave a faint smile. "I asked around. The guards remembered the logo on your apron from yesterday. I wanted to find you." Maya glanced around awkwardly. Is your son okay?" "He's fine," Richard said, his voice softening for the first time. "He has a mild concussion and a broken wrist. But the doctors said your quick thinking helped prevent something much worse. I wanted to thank you again." "It's good," Maya said, letting out a breath of relief. "I'm really glad he's okay." Richard looked around at the crowded diner, clearly out of place among the clatter of plates and chatter. "May I sit?" he asked. Maya nodded hesitantly. He sat at a corner booth, and she brought him a cup of coffee before he could ask. He seemed uncomfortable, like he'd never done this kind of thing before. "I owe you more than just a thank you," he began. "You could have walked away yesterday. Most people would have waited for the guards. But you didn't." I shrugged. "He's just a kid." "Anyone would have done the same." "Not everyone," Richard said. His eyes were calm but curious, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "When I tried to thank you yesterday, you refused the money." "Why?" She smiled a little. "Because it didn't feel right. I didn't help him for money. I just wanted him to be safe." Richard leaned back, surprised by her simple honesty. In his world, everything had a price: time, loyalty, friendship, even kindness. But here was someone who didn't seem to want anything from him. "So what do you do?" he asked, glancing at her apron. "I'm a waitress," she said, pouring coffee for another table. "I used to study nursing, but life got in the way." "What happened?" he asked, genuinely curious. Maya hesitated. "My mom got sick. I dropped out to take care of her. After she passed, I just never went back. Bills had to be paid." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of sizzling bacon filled the silence. Richard stirred his coffee slowly, watching the steam rise. "You wanted to help people," he said quietly. "And you still do, even now." Maya gave a small laugh. "Maybe. But now, I mostly just serve pancakes and clean tables." Richard looked up at her. Sometimes helping doesn't need a title. She didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever said something like that to her before. After a few minutes, Maya had to get back to work. "I should check on my tables," she said, trying to keep things professional. "Of course," he said, standing up. He reached into his jacket again, but before he could hand her anything, she stopped him with a small shake of her head. "No money," she said gently. He smiled for the first time, a real, quiet smile that softened his serious face. "You're stubborn." "Maybe a little," she said, returning the smile. As he turned to leave, a few customers whispered excitedly. Everyone in the diner now knew that a billionaire had just sat there drinking cheap coffee with one of their own waitresses. Maya ignored the stares and tried to act normal, though her heart was still racing. Later that evening, as the diner was closing, Lena came rushing up to her. "You're not going to believe this," she said breathlessly. Pointing out the window parked across the street was the same sleek black SUV from earlier. The tinted window rolled down slowly, and there he was again, Richard Hale. "What is he doing here again?" Lena whispered. "Is he following you?" Maya felt a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity. "I'll be right back," she said, walking outside. The cool night air brushed against her face as she crossed the street. Richard stepped out of the car, this time dressed more casually, no tie. "Just a simple jacket." "You came back?" she said, half smiling. "I did," he admitted. "I wanted to apologize if I made things awkward earlier. I don't usually meet people who don't want something from me." Maya tilted her head. "You came all the way here just to say that?" He nodded. "And to ask if I could buy you dinner, as a thank you, not as payment?" She laughed softly. "You're persistent." "I'm just trying to say thank you the only way I know how," he said honestly. "But if you'd rather not, I'll understand." Maya hesitated. She wasn't sure what to think of this powerful man suddenly appearing in her simple world, but she saw something in his eyes, not arrogance or pride, just sincerity and maybe a little loneliness. "Dinner sounds okay," she said finally. "But somewhere normal? No fancy places." He smiled, a little amused. "Normal is fine." They ended up sitting at a small late-night cafe nearby, drinking hot chocolate instead of wine. For the first time, Richard talked about things he never shared with anyone. How he lost his wife years ago. How raising Ethan alone was harder than any business deal he'd ever made. And how success didn't make the emptiness go away. Maya listened quietly. She didn't interrupt or try to impress him. She just listened, something few people ever did for him. When the night ended, Richard thanked her again and promised to stay in touch. As Maya watched him leave, she couldn't help but feel that something had shifted. Not just in his life, but in hers too. She didn't know why this stranger cared so much, but part of her wanted to believe that maybe kindness really could change people, even those who seemed to have everything, that night. As she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the quiet look in Richard's eyes when he said goodbye. It wasn't the look of a billionaire. It was the look of a man who had finally met someone real. Days turned into weeks after that evening at the cafe. Life went on, but it didn't feel the same for either Maya or Richard. Maya kept working her usual shifts at the diner. But every time the bell above the door rang, she couldn't help glancing up, half expecting to see him again. And sometimes she did. Richard began visiting the diner more often, though he never made it obvious. He'd sit at the same corner booth, order coffee, and talk to Maya whenever she had a free minute. Sometimes they spoke about Ethan's recovery, other times about everyday things, food, books, or how the weather never seemed to match the forecast. For Maya, it felt strange but nice. For Richard, it was something he hadn't felt in years. Normal. One afternoon, Maya was wiping down the counter when Lena nudged her playfully. "Your rich friend's back," she whispered, nodding toward the door. Maya turned and saw him walking in, dressed simply in a gray sweater and jeans instead of his usual suit. "Afternoon," he said as he sat down. "Back for more diner coffee?" She teased. "It's better than the expensive stuff they serve in meetings," he said with a smile. They talked for a while, and then Richard mentioned something unexpected. "Ethan's been asking about you. He keeps saying you're the lady who made him brave." Maya's eyes softened. "He remembers that?" "Very clearly," Richard said. "Would you like to visit him sometime?" "He'd love to see you." At first she hesitated. Visiting a billionaire's son in a private hospital didn't exactly sound like something a waitress should be doing. But when she saw the sincerity in Richard's face, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "I'd like that." A few days later, she went to the hospital. The room was bright and filled with flowers, toys, and expensive machines that quietly hummed. Ethan was sitting up in bed with a cast on his arm, drawing with colored pencils. When he saw her, his face lit up instantly. "Miss Maya," he shouted happily. She laughed and went over to him. "Hey, buddy. You look so much better." He grinned proudly. "Dad says I'm tough." "You are," she said, kneeling beside his bed. "And brave, too." Richard stood nearby, watching them. For the first time in a long while, he saw his son laughing freely. It wasn't forced or shit, it was pure happiness. And he knew it had a lot to do with Maya. As days passed, Maya visited Ethan more often. Sometimes she brought him books. Other times just stories about the world outside the hospital walls. Ethan loved her company, and Richard found himself drawn to her warmth and kindness. She wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. She didn't treat him like Mr. Hale, the billionaire. She treated him like a father, a man, and that was something new for him. Soon, Richard started doing small things to help her, quietly and without asking. One morning, the owner of the diner announced that an anonymous donor had paid to repair the leaking roof that had been causing problems for months. The staff was thrilled. Maya, however, had her suspicions. Later that week, she brought it up when Richard stopped by for his usual coffee. "Was that you?" she asked with a small smile. He tried to act innocent. "Was what, me?" "The diner roof," she said, crossing her arms. "You donated the money, didn't you?" He looked away, pretending to sip his coffee. "Maybe why?" she asked. He shrugged. "It needed fixing." Maya shook her head, half amused, half frustrated. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he said simply. "Not everything has to be a transaction," she sighed. "You're impossible, maybe," he said, smiling. "But you're welcome anyway." Their friendship grew deeper after that. They started meeting outside the diner sometimes, usually in quiet parks or small cafes, where no one cared who Richard Hale was. Maya found herself enjoying his company more than she wanted to admit. He wasn't just a billionaire with a cold heart. He was kind, thoughtful, and surprisingly funny when he let his guard down. But peace never lasts long when money and fame are involved. One morning, Maya walked into work and froze when she saw people whispering and staring at her. Lena rushed over, holding her phone. "Maya, you need to see this," she said. Handing it to her, on the screen was a tabloid article with a headline that made Maya's stomach drop. "Mystery woman who saved billionaire son spotted having secret dinners with Richard Hale." Beneath it were photos, some of her walking beside Richard near the cafe, one of her laughing as he held the door open for her. The captions were cruel, calling her a waitress turned social climber and a gold digger pretending to be a hero. Maya felt her chest tighten. "This isn't true," she whispered. Lena put a hand on her shoulder. "I know, but people believe what they read." Within hours, reporters began calling the diner, asking for comments. A camera crew even tried to come inside. Maya's boss panicked. "I'm sorry, Maya," he said nervously. "You're good at your job, but I can't have this kind of attention here. You need to take some time off." She packed her things quietly, holding back tears as she left through the back door. The people she served every day were now whispering about her like she'd done something terrible that evening. Her phone rang. It was Richard. "Maya, don't read the articles." "I'm handling it," he said. She sighed. "It's too late. Everyone's already decided who I am. I'll talk to the press," he promised. "I'll make a statement." "No," she said firmly. "That'll just make it worse. They'll twist everything." "Maya, I can fix this," he insisted. "You can't fix everything with money, Richard," she said softly. "This is my life, and now it's a mess." He was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know," she replied quietly. "But maybe it's better if we don't see each other for a while." After hanging up, she sat on the edge of her bed, feeling lost. All she'd done was help a child, and now her simple life was turned upside down. But while she sat in that small apartment, staring at the flickering light of her phone, Richard was making a different choice. The next day, he appeared in front of reporters outside his office. Cameras flashed as he spoke clearly. "The woman in those pictures is Maya Torres. She saved my son's life. She is not a liar, not an opportunist, and not someone looking for fame. She deserves respect and peace, not judgment." The video spread everywhere. Some people admired his honesty. Others still doubted Maya's intentions. But Richard didn't care. For once, he used his power not to protect his company, but to protect someone who had no one else to stand up for her. When Maya saw the video, tears filled her eyes. She realized he didn't have to do that. He did it because he cared. And though the rumors didn't vanish overnight, his words changed the tone. Still, deep inside, Maya knew things could never be the same. Her world and his were too far apart. Yet, every time she thought about walking away completely, she remembered Ethan's smile and the quiet way Richard said, "You're different." She didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. Their lives had become intertwined in a way that neither fame nor money could undo. The noise of gossip didn't fade. It only grew louder. For days. The tabloids kept publishing news stories about Maya. Some claimed she had planned everything from the start. She pretended to save Ethan just to get close to his father. Others said she was living in a luxury apartment paid for by Richard, even though she still slept in her small, worn-out one-room place. Every time she walked outside, she felt people's eyes following her. The same customers who once smiled at her now whispered behind their coffee cups. Her phone didn't stop buzzing with unknown numbers reporters. Strangers, even people asking for interviews. One night, when she finally answered a call out of frustration, a woman's voice sneered, "How much did you get for the act, sweetheart?" Before hanging up, Maya sat on her bed, holding the phone in silence, tears filling her eyes. She had never felt so humiliated. Richard tried to reach her many times, but she didn't pick up. She didn't want to see him. She knew he was trying to help, but every time his name appeared in her life, the world turned on her again. She wasn't angry at him, just tired. She had lived her whole life quietly, and now that peace was gone. One evening, she was walking home after buying groceries when she saw her picture on a newspaper stand. The headline read, "Waitress who caught a billionaire's eye disappears after scandal." She laughed bitterly. "If only they knew," she whispered, pulling her scarf tighter around her face. Meanwhile, Richard was furious. He wasn't used to feeling helpless. But this time, his money and power meant nothing. Every time he tried to stop the gossip, more appeared. His advisors told him to stay silent, that the media storm would pass. But how could he stay silent when Maya was suffering because of him? He went to her apartment building one evening, but she refused to open the door. "Please, Maya," he said through the wood. "Talk to me." "Richard, please go home," she said quietly. This is already hard enough. I can fix this, he said. No, you can't, she replied, her voice shaking. You can't buy silence, you can't buy respect, and you can't buy peace. That's what your world doesn't understand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she whispered, I just need to disappear for a while. Then the door stayed closed. For days after that, Richard didn't see her. He sent messages, asked around, even had his assistant check hospitals just in case something had happened. But there was nothing. She had truly vanished. Ethan noticed it too. He had recovered enough to return home, and every day he asked the same question. When is Miss Maya coming? Richard didn't know what to say. He kept promising soon, but he could see the disappointment in his son's eyes. One night, after putting Ethan to bed, Richard sat alone in his study. He looked around at the shelves lined with awards, photos, and business magazines that called him a genius of finance. But none of it felt important. The silence of his mansion was louder than ever. He realized that, for all his success, he couldn't protect the one person who had shown him kindness without expecting anything in return. Finally, after a week of silence, one of his guards told him they had seen Maya leaving her apartment with a suitcase. She was heading to the train station. Richard didn't think twice. He grabbed his coat, got in his car, and told his driver, "Take me there, now." It was raining when he arrived. The station was crowded, people rushing everywhere, umbrellas bumping into each other. He searched the platforms until he spotted her, a small figure in a worn jacket, holding an old brown suitcase. She looked tired, almost fragile, but still carried herself with quiet strength. "Maya," he called out. She froze. Slowly she turned and saw him standing a few feet away, drenched from the rain. "What are you doing here?" she asked softly. "I had to find you," he said, walking closer. "You can't just disappear." "I have to," she said. "I lost my job, my peace, everything. People think I used you. They don't see the truth. And being around you only makes it worse." He shook his head. "You think I care what people say? Let them talk. They've been talking about me my entire life." "It's easy for you," she said quietly. "You have money, power, protection. I have nothing, Richard. Just a small life that's now ruined because I tried to help." Her words hit him like a slap. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I never meant for this to happen. You don't deserve this. None of it." Maya looked down at her suitcase. "Maybe not, but it did. And I can't keep living like this." He took a deep breath. "Then let me come with you." She stared at him, shocked. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious," he said. "Maybe I need to leave that world too." She shook her head, half smiling through her tears. "You don't belong in my world any more than I belong in yours. You have your life, your responsibilities, your son. I just need to find myself again." When he didn't answer, she said softly, "I'll be fine, Richard. Please go home." He looked at her for a long time, then said, almost in a whisper, "You didn't just save Ethan that day. You saved me too." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then don't make this harder." The sound of the train horn echoed through the station. She picked up her suitcase and turned away. Richard stood there watching as she stepped onto the train, his heart sinking. The doors closed and she disappeared from view. As the train pulled away, he realized that for all his power, he couldn't stop the one thing that mattered most, her choice to walk away. That night, when he came home, Ethan ran to him, smiling. "Did you find her, Dad?" he asked. Richard knelt down, forcing a smile. "Not yet, buddy. But maybe one day?" Ethan hugged him tightly. "I miss her," he said. "I know," Richard whispered. "Me too." Days turned into weeks again. The media eventually moved on to another story. People stopped talking about Maya. But for Richard, her absence stayed heavy. Every time he passed the park where it all began, he remembered her running toward his son without hesitation. That moment replayed in his mind like a movie he couldn't turn off. He didn't know where she had gone, but he hoped she was safe. Maybe she found a new place where no one cared about who she had helped or what people thought. Maybe she was finally free. Still, Every time he saw Ethan drawing or laughing, he could see traces of Maya in his son's happiness. It reminded him that the best things in life weren't bought or planned, they came unexpectedly. Like a stranger running across a playground on a sunny day, and though she was gone, he knew one thing for sure. Maya had changed his world in a way that no amount of money ever could. Weeks passed, and Maya had finally settled into a quieter life. She had moved to a small town outside the city, working at a local clinic where she could finally follow her old dream of becoming a nurse. Her days were long and tiring, but there was a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. The scandal had faded from the headlines, and the world seemed to have forgotten about her. She liked it that way. She could focus on helping people, not worrying about gossip or rich men. One sunny afternoon, she was organizing medical supplies in the clinic when the door opened. At first she thought it was a patient, but then she heard a small, excited voice call out, "Miss Maya." She turned, and her heart nearly stopped. There was Ethan running toward her, smiling and laughing, his small arms stretched wide. Behind him was a familiar figure, Richard Hale, dressed casually, but with the same intense, caring eyes she remembered. Her hands dropped the clipboard she was holding, and for a moment she could barely speak. "Ethan," she cried, rushing to scoop him up into a hug. His laughter echoed through the clinic, and she felt a wave of happiness she hadn't realized she missed. "You're okay?" "I'm fine," Ethan said proudly, hugging her tightly. "Dad says I can see you now." Richard stepped closer, smiling quietly. "Hi, Maya," he said softly, almost shyly. He looked different from the first time she had met him, less guarded, more relaxed, almost like a man who had learned something new about life. "I didn't expect to see you here," she managed to say, still holding Ethan's small hand. "I know," he replied, "but I couldn't wait any longer. There's something I want to show you." Curious, Maya followed him outside. They walked a short distance to a small building that looked surprisingly simple for something associated with a billionaire. "This is a community clinic and training center," Richard explained. "I've started it in your name, the Maya Torres Foundation. It's for students who want to become nurses or medical professionals, but can't afford education. I want you to lead it." Maya stared, speechless. "Why would you?" "Do this for me?" she whispered. "Because," he said, his voice steady, "you taught me something I hadn't realized in a long time. That life isn't measured by wealth or power. It's measured by kindness, courage, and what we give to others. You showed me that." Tears filled her eyes. She had never imagined anything like this, a place where she could finally use her skills, help people, and make a real difference. I don't know what to say," she said softly. "Then say yes," Richard replied simply. "Take this chance. Make a difference. Lead it your way." Ethan tugged on her arm. "Please, Miss Maya. You have to say yes." She laughed, a genuine laugh that felt like it had been trapped inside her for months. "All right," she said finally, hugging both of them. "I'll do it." Over the next few weeks, Maya began working at the foundation. She trained students, helped organize programs, and watched as eager young people learned and grew under her guidance. She loved every moment of it, and for the first time in years, she felt proud of herself. She realized that all the struggles she had faced, the gossip, the fear, the exhaustion, had led her here. She was finally where she was meant to be. Richard visited often, but he didn't interfere. He watched quietly from the sidelines, letting Maya take charge. Sometimes, he would bring Ethan along, and the boy would chatter excitedly about what he learned at school or how he helped with small tasks around the clinic. Richard noticed how naturally Maya cared for others, not just Ethan, not just the students, but everyone around her. She had a gentle way of making people feel valued and capable. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Richard and Maya sat on a bench outside the building, watching the sunset. Ethan was playing nearby, laughing as he kicked a soccer ball. Maya looked at Richard and smiled softly. "You know," she said, "I never thought my life would go this way. All I wanted was a simple life, and now, it's more than I ever imagined." Richard nodded. "Sometimes life surprises us," he said. "And sometimes the people we meet change everything without even realizing it." Maya looked at him, noticing a softness in his eyes that had never been there before. She realized she had changed too, that she cared for him more than she expected. But it wasn't about wealth or power. It was about the kindness and honesty he had shown her, the way he had respected her choices, and the way he had fought for her when she needed him most. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," she admitted quietly. "And I never thought I'd meet someone like you either," he replied, smiling gently. Over time, their friendship grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. People noticed their bond, but neither cared about the world's opinions anymore. They focused on the foundation, on Ethan, and on the small moments that mattered most. Months passed, and the foundation thrived. Students graduated, patients were helped, and Maya felt fulfilled in a way she never had before. Richard and Maya continued to spend time together, not as a billionaire and a waitress, but as two people who had found each other through a chance encounter that had changed all their lives. One afternoon, Ethan ran up to them, holding a small handmade card. "For you, Miss Maya," he exclaimed proudly. She opened it and saw a drawing of the three of them, smiling together. Tears filled her eyes, and she hugged Ethan tightly. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is perfect," Richard watched, smiling quietly. He reached for Maya's hand, holding it gently. "You changed everything for us," he said softly. "Not just Ethan, not just me. Our whole lives." Maya squeezed his hand in return. "We changed each other," she said, and in that moment they both knew it was true. A simple act of kindness, a fall in the park, and a woman who ran without thinking had changed the course of all their lives forever. Years later, people still remembered the story. Not the scandal, not the tabloids, not the gossip, but the story of a little boy who fell at a playground, a waitress who ran to help him, and how that moment created a ripple of kindness, courage, and love that changed three lives forever. Maya, Richard, and Ethan had found something rare and precious, a life where wealth didn't define happiness, and where true connection and care mattered more than anything else. And for Maya, that simple, quiet life she had always dreamed of had finally become real, full of purpose, love, and joy she had never imagined possible.